Welcome to the Deep Dive, the only show that rips through the research so you're instantly fluent to the dense, complicated topics that define our world.
Today we are tackling, maybe the biggest question there is, the one that science, philosophy, psychology have all been wrestling with forever.
Right. And the question is for you, the listener. Are you truly the author of your actions?
Or is that whole profound experience of choosing your character, your goals, even your willpower, is it all just a brilliant lifelong illusion created by the deterministic machinery of your brain?
It's the ultimate conflict. And we've done a deep dive into a really heavy stack of sources for you. Everything from neuroscientific summaries, especially Robert Sapolsky's work, to classic social psychology on the illusion of control.
And the core philosophical debates, of course. Our mission here is to find the collision points, the specific nuggets of evidence where biology seems to just crush the idea of personal agency, even while our own experience, tells us the complete opposite.
Exactly. So we're going to trace this causal chain.
Yeah, the overwhelming evidence for determinism that stretches from milliseconds before you act all the way back to your ancestors' genes. Then we'll look at the ingenious psychological and neurological tricks that our brains use to make us feel in control, even when we're not.
Okay, so let's start by mapping out the philosophical terrain.
Sounds good.
If you get into this academic world, you realize pretty fast it's not a simple yes or no question. The academics have like three very specific ways of framing their views on free will and determinism.
That's right. And the first one is, well, it's arguably the most controversial. It's called illusionism.
Illusionism, okay.
These are the thinkers who accept that, scientifically, philosophically, genuine free choice doesn't exist. But the controversial part is what they decide to do with that knowledge.
Wait, you mean they sort of believe in two different versions of the truth?
Pretty much. Some adopt what's called a negative illusionism. They just keep quiet about their deterministic views because they're afraid of the social backlash.
And the others?
The others advocate for positive illusionism. This means they actively promote the belief in free will to the public. They basically suppress the truth because they worry about what would happen if we all knew.
That seems dangerous.
Yeah.
Are they actually advocating for lying to people? Or is it more subtle than that?
Well, one of our sources pointed out this inherent danger in social psychology. They'll publish studies about the pro-social benefits of believing in free will. It makes you more charitable, more responsible. But at the same time, they're suppressing the serious scientific doubts about whether it exists at all. It's the very paternalistic, don't rock the boat position.
Okay, so we have the hardline suppressors.
Yeah.
What about the people who try to bridge the gap? The compromisers.
That brings us to compatibilism. This idea goes way back, even to the early Stoics. And it argues that free will and a totally deterministic universe, they can coexist.
How do they manage that?
They do it by redefining free will. They make it something less demanding than genuine freedom of choice or, the ability to have actually done otherwise.
Can you give us an example of what that redefinition looks like?
Sure. A compatibilist might say, you were free to choose X because X was caused by an internal process. Your thoughts, your desires.
Okay.
Even if those thoughts and desires were ultimately caused by forces completely beyond your control, sometimes they even try to bring quantum mechanics into it.
But isn't that just semantics, though? If you redefine freedom to just mean my actions were caused by something inside me, even if I couldn't control that cause, aren't you just agreeing with determinism, but using friendlier words?
That's the core critique. And it's exactly why that middle position is so contested.
So it's the third group.
Finally, you have metaphysical libertarianism. This is the traditional intuitive view that you are an uncaused cause capable of real, non-determined choice.
The common sense view.
Right. But mainstream science and philosophy today, they largely see this as an illogical, pure faith position because it kind of requires an external agent, like a soul or a spirit, that defies any scientific explanation.
Okay, so the scientific case against that is pretty strong. And it's built on a chronological timeline, right? A seamless continuum of causes.
It's overwhelming. When neuroscientists look at a behavior, they see a causal chain that stretches from milliseconds before you act all the way back through millennia of evolution. There's just no point where you suddenly pop into existence as the uncaused prime mover.
No crack at daylight, as one source put it.
Exactly. No crack of daylight for free will to sneak in.
So let's ground this in reality for you, the listener. If we're looking for that moment of decision, where does this causal chain start?
Right at the instant before the action. We're talking seconds before. Unconscious environmental factors are constantly biasing your decisions.
Like what?
Okay, so a classic study. You put people in a room that smells just slightly of putrid garbage. They become measurably more socially conservative, more judgmental.
Just from a bad smell.
Yes, their neural circuits that link sensory disgust with moral disgust just light up.
And if you swap that smell for something pleasant, fresh cookies maybe.
If the room smells of fresh chocolate chip cookies, they become significantly more generous in economic games. But here's the crucial point for you.
What's that?
When the researchers asked them why they shifted their opinions or their generosity, they always confabulated. They invented a rational reason after the fact.
So I had a really good breakfast, or I just decided to be stricter today.
Exactly. Never realizing a simple smell drove the entire shift. The brain is just a brilliant internal PR firm, constantly explaining decisions that were already made for non-conscious reasons.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. What about things operating over, say, a day or two?
Hours to days before. That's hormones. We have over 75 different types of hormones circulating, and they're influencing memory, emotion, decision-making, all without our awareness.
For instance?
Glucocorticoids, the stress hormones. If you've had a really stressful morning, your ability to apply impulse control later in the day is measurably degraded. It's pure chemistry.
Now we're moving into the construction period.
Yeah.
The years before the behavior.
Months to years before, you have neuroplasticity. Your experiences, trauma, diet, your job, they constantly change how your neurons connect. And critically, you have adolescence.
Right, a massive construction period for the brain's highest center, the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
Exactly. The PFC is the brake pedal of the brain. It handles impulse control, planning, character. The problem is that brake pedal, it matures way later than the brain's dopamine system, the gas pedal.
So the gas is fully functional long before the brake is installed.
And that's why adolescents are essentially trapped behaving in, well, adolescent ways. It's not a choice. It's a structural imbalance.
And even earlier, when the foundation itself is being laid.
Childhood and fetal life. The socioeconomic status, or SES, of a child's family predicts the size and volume of that all-important PFC. And you can see it in 4-week-olds.
Wow.
Yeah. Lower SES correlates with worse PFC development, and it's mediated by chronic stress, those damaging glucocorticoids again, and lack of stimulation. One source put a number on it. By age 3, the average high SES kid has heard about 30 million more words than a poor kid.
30 million. And that landscape is 100% beyond the child's control.
100%. Yet it fundamentally builds their decision-making architecture for life. And that's before we even get to genes and evolution. You didn't choose your genes, and you didn't choose the culture of your ancestors from centuries ago. It's a seamless arc of influence.
Okay, but there's always the loophole people bring up. Quantum physics.
Yeah.
If the universe is fundamentally random at the smallest level, doesn't that give us the wiggle room for choice?
It's the favorite loophole, but scientifically the consensus is no, for 2 big reasons. First, physicist Max Tegmark showed that any quantum states in the brain would decay way too quickly in the warm, wet noise of the brain to have any real effect.
So the brain's environment just smears out the randomness.
Precisely. And the second reason is even more damaging to the idea. Even if quantum effects could bubble up and influence our actions, they would only introduce true randomness.
Right, not choice.
Not choice. As one neuroscientist put it, if quantum randomness governed your behavior, you'd just be making gargly sounds because the muscles in your tongue would be doing all sorts of random things. Free will isn't random. It's consistent and intentional. And science says that consistency is determined.
So, if we accept this relentless causal chain, the huge remaining question is why our subjective experience of choice feels so visceral, so undeniable. Why do we feel like we're the one making the call?
That leads us directly to the illusion of control. It's a term from psychologist Ellen Langer, and it's this tendency we all have to overestimate our ability to control things that are really just pure chance.
Can you give us an example of how strong that illusion is? Something for you, the listener, to really visualize.
Okay, think about the lottery. In one study, they either let people choose their own lottery ticket or just assign them one.
Same odds either way.
Exactly, pure chance. But when the researcher offered to buy the tickets back, the people who had chosen their ticket demanded way more money, an average of $8.67.
And the ones who were just given one?
Only $1.96. The simple act of choosing inflated the perceived value and control over a random event by over 400%.
That's incredible. So the brain is constantly acting like a narrator for actions it didn't actually write.
That's the core of the apparent mental causation theory. Conscious will isn't the cause of action. It's an experience, an authorship emotion. It's your mind's compass, indicating that an action was probably your own.
And what are the cues the brain uses to create that authorship emotion?
It's built on three principles. Priority, the thought comes just before the action. Consistency, the thought matches the action. And exclusivity, there are no other obvious external causes.
Which brings us to the I Spy study. That one perfectly shows how you can manufacture that feeling.
The Ouija board experiment, yeah. A participant shares a pointer with another person who's secretly controlling it. But the participant is led to believe they willfully stopped the pointer just because they were primed with the idea of the object right before it happened.
So because the thought came first and matched the action, and they didn't see anyone else do it.
Their brain created the conscious experience of will even though someone else performed the action entirely.
And the neurological opposite of this confirms it too.
Yeah.
Like the strange cases where people act without feeling like they're in control.
That's alien hand syndrome. A person's hand just operates on its own, doing things against their conscious intention. It shows that the mechanism for action and the mechanism for the feeling of agency are totally separate in the brain.
So how does the brain pull off this high-speed trick of distinguishing its own actions from someone else's?
The leading model is called predictive processing, or active inference. Your sensorimotor system uses internal models to constantly predict the sensory outcome of your intended actions.
So the feeling of agency is really about minimizing surprise.
Exactly. It's all about minimizing something called free energy. Your brain is constantly trying to match its predictions to incoming sensory data. When your prediction, "I'm about to lift my arm," perfectly matches the result, that's the aha, I did that feeling. The brain has successfully minimized surprise, and that feeling is the sense of agency.
This is where the whole debate leaves the lab and really hits the streets. Because if we embrace this scientific view of determinism, the entire structure of moral responsibility and justice starts to wobble.
It creates profound social dilemmas. You see it in policy all the time. Take the downside of believing in absolute free will. Research from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation in the UK, it found that up to 83% of Britons attributed poverty not to, social misfortune or biology, but to individual choice.
83%. That's a stunning number. So the belief that anyone can make it if they really try translates directly into less empathy.
Absolutely. The study found a corresponding drastic fall in support for wealth redistribution from 51% down to 38% in just a few years. Sympathy was limited only to those who didn't choose to be poor.
So what about the justice system? If we accept the deterministic view, the idea that someone deserves to suffer, that whole concept just collapses, right?
Scientifically, yeah, concepts like blame and retributive punishment become unjustifiable. And we need to remember that punishment actually activates the dopamine reward pathway in the punisher's brain. It literally feels good to get revenge.
So we punish because it's biologically rewarding to us, not necessarily because the criminal is a freely willing moral agent. What's the alternative then?
Well, philosophers like Derek Perebroom and Greg Caruso suggest moving toward a medical quarantine model for criminals. It focuses entirely on prevention, on addressing the social and biological causes of the behavior.
So confinement would only be to prevent future harm, not to exact vengeance.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from moral blame to risk management and social uplift.
But critics worry that removing moral responsibility leads to a moral desert, a world without meaning. You have to provide that other perspective for the listener.
We absolutely must. Proponents of determinism, though, they quickly point out that the world became a lot more humane when we stopped blaming people for things like epilepsy or schizophrenia. We don't blame for diseases of the brain, we treat them.
And some argue the illusion itself is useful.
Right. They see the experience of will as functional. That feeling of choosing, it generates a crucial delay in thought and action that actually improves the quality of the final outcome. The illusion, in that sense, is an adaptive and valuable system property. It was selected for its utility, not its truth.
So the grand irony is that the feeling of freedom is likely a deterministic function designed to make us better at controlling our actions. The causal chain dictates your behavior, but your brain powerfully generates the feeling of authorship because it's essential for social life.
That is the essential takeaway. The irony is incredibly rich. Which brings us to our final provocative question. We debated whether the conscious experience of agency is an adaptation, selected for its current use, or if it's a spandrel.
A spandrel, like the space between arches in a cathedral.
Yeah.
It wasn't designed for painting, but it ended up being a perfect spot for it.
Exactly. So if our conscious experience of agency is just an authorship emotion that evolved to help us track which actions we can regulate, what does that imply about the purpose of your goals? The foundational problem remains. If your character and your motivation are products of forces beyond your control, can you then truly will yourself to have more willpower?
You can't successfully wish what you're going to wish for.
You can't. The battle is over determinism one. But the illusion of agency is arguably the most valuable tool the human brain ever created. Think about that the next time you rely on sheer willpower.